And all of those companies will be here today. Representatives from all those companies will be here today. But to start us out, I got to tell you, a lot of years ago, I first met Terry Savage when I was in college, and she did a presentation. And it was I've only been out of college a few years, and it was very impressive. It was one of the things that guided my career. If you haven't seen her, you have to have seen about Terry. She's everywhere. The news media, television. She's written some great books. If you haven't had a chance to read any of her books, take a look at those. And not only is Terry here today, but she's also brought a couple of legends with her. So with that, I'm just going to give it over to Terry and Dennis and Richard and say, come on up.
Thank you very much, Doris. That's it. No more introduction. We have a short time and some fabulous guests. I'm Terry Savage, and aside from all that, I've been totally fascinated by blockchain for years, and that's partly because of Dennis Chookaszian. Let me introduce my guest. On the far end is Dennis Chookaszian. I feel like I'm sitting here today I have this rare opportunity to talk with both Ben Franklin and Leonardo da Vinci at the same time. That is what I think about these gentlemen. And when George offered me this opportunity to kick off the day, I said, I'm going to bring you two of the greatest thinkers in this space as well as practical people. So Dennis Chookaszian is former CEO of CNA Insurance, but that's just the supplemental. He sat on the board of FASAC, which is the Financial Accounting Standards Board Advisory Council, so he knows everything about audit. He's been named the Outstanding Corporate Director, and he serves on many corporate boards, significantly the board of CME Group, where I also serve. He's chair of the Audit Committee, and I serve on that committee. I am in awe of what he knows. He teaches across the world. I'm both at University of Chicago Booth and at two places in China and one in India on the graduate level. And he turned me on to blockchain, it must be 5 or 6 years ago, and sends me at least 3 times a week at 3 in the morning, which is when he's awake thinking, some article about this development of blockchain. Now, Dr. Richard Sandor, Doc as everybody in the street calls him, is a legend beyond belief. He is the man that created the concept of trading, and not only the concept, but the practical way of trading financial futures. It's a subject too big to discuss, but we wouldn't have the $1 trillion global treasury bond market today or other futures markets if Doc hadn't come up with a way to make that happen at the Board of Trade. After that, he moved on to create the climate exchange, believing that you could regulate and trade carbon futures much better than any government entity to save the planet. And for that, Time magazine gave him the Hero of the Planet Award for creating the climate exchange. And he's very proud that he is now a Chevalier of the Légion d'Honneur in France, which is really a French knighthood. And but that wasn't enough. Richard has gone on to found the American Financial Exchange, AFX, based here in Chicago. It's an exchange platform for mid-sized business loans to be traded and priced. We had LIBOR, so what happened to that? Now the Ameribor index for mid-sized business loans to be priced and traded is giving them real practical insight into the cost of doing business in America. And I could go on, but Richard Sandor just published this book, which he sent me in the galleys, and I said, oh gosh, you and Dennis Chookaszian have to sit down. And this is the first time we've gotten together. The book is called Electronic Trading and Blockchain, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. So what could be more timely? And let me start with you, Richard. I'm asking our panel, our guests, to give me 3 minutes. You know I'm tough because I spent all those years on TV and I have a clock in my head. The whole idea today is to set the tone, the overall tone. We have so many sophisticated guests. We're way past explaining to your neighbor, hey, so what's this cryptocurrency stuff? Should I buy some? That's not where we are today. I'm going to ask them to talk about where we are in the transformative role of the blockchain ledger. We'll get to cryptocurrencies. And Richard, let's start with you because I heard you speak and I know it says it in the book. Things are moving much more quickly than most would think.
Yeah, I think they are moving quickly, and we've seen a dramatic change in wealth creation, Terry, just in answer the question first. In the 70s, at least in the city of Chicago, it was a commodity-driven wealth. Soybean markets, Russian crop failures, the commoditization of interest rates and equities. In the 80s, it was democratization, another kind of commoditization, junk bonds. People, thought that there could be a 24-hour cable network. A guy by the name of Ted Turner. Terry McGaugh thought cell phones might be a good word, and a couple of other things. Bill McGaugh thought maybe AT&T won't be the provider. So the 80s was a different kind. The 90s was technology. Microsoft goes public in 86, Cisco in 90, the birth of the web, commoditization of information, and I think the wealth creation of the 21st century, 207, the iPhone, is going to be in blockchain, and that's the premise. How quickly is the answer. We speak about in 1969 when I was teaching at UC Berkeley, don't make any inferences about that, when the world was...
You're a lefty, Pinko.
This was, we'll get to Terry, your story in a moment. Anyway, I had the privilege of coming to Chicago. I had traded commodities, and somebody said, we want to start a new exchange, and I proposed a for-profit electronic exchange in 1970. And the people, this was before the PCs, it was cathode ray tubes, and it's in the book, and all of this stuff, and you can imagine I came to Chicago, wasn't well received, and neither did the people who financed it. It was Bank of America that did, and a grant to the university. So 70 was nominally the academic background for electronic trading. The first implementation, Schumpeter speaks about invention, innovation, and replication. So the invention, 1970. The commercialization, first time successful, Sofx in 86. And then Durex taking the Bunds from London to Germany in 90, and full implementation by the CME and of Globex, and ultimately 31-year timeline. Okay? Let's look at blockchain and infer from electronic trading what might be the business case. The invention is not Nakamoto. Anybody know where the first blockchain occurred?
Come on, someone, this is... Okay, someone give him an answer. Way back there in the back.
Bitcoin.
Where?
New Jersey.
New Jersey?
Yes.
Well, you get an A for the course.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
New Jersey?
New Jersey. Neighbor and Dornetti wrote an article in the Journal of Cryptography in 1990. Let's look at the same timeline. The first implementation was in 94. The trusted network, which is still being published today, is an ad in the Weekend New York Times that identifies and ratifies this happening. So then comes Nakamoto, as 2008, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. 31 years from 1991, and validated by a Schumpeterian, says blockchain should be ubiquitous in 2020 or 21. This is not something of tomorrow. And that's the hypothesis. It's here, it's going more rapidly, and in 2021 it will have the first full implementation, again like electronic trading, not in America, but on the Australian Stock Exchange with digital assets. Although AFX is using blockchain, now, Terry, to track loans, where they're from, what small banks, what the characteristics of the bank, but full-scale ecosystem will, in fact, be launched by digital assets. And a lot of the names we both know, from ICE and DRW and people like that, are already inventors.
Wow. All right, so I feel blockchain breathing down my neck.
It is.
All right, Dennis, I don't know anybody who tracks, has the capacity to track what's going on in a broadest sense. So give us your, is this right? Is it that imminent? The use of blockchain? We'll get to cryptos later. Some people came on and said, well, what about the cryptos? But let's talk about the fact of this technology that enables everything. How close are we? What do you see?
Close.
Moderator's delight. Close.
The typical moderator's
Yeah.
horror. Quickly on, so what is it? What is blockchain? And it's interesting because when you have an audience of this size, you have very different knowledge levels. Some people know a lot, some know a little. But let's start with a couple quick definitions and piggyback on what Richard said, because it's not new. 30 years. So I think the most interesting thing about blockchain and cryptocurrencies is that over the course of the last 50 or 100 years, particularly in the US, you have many libertarian ideas that have been formulated. And really, it's hard to think of any libertarian idea that has ever resulted in anything that's major. And the libertarian idea is that we want to be free of government. We don't want some big brother monitoring what we're doing. And when you get down to the core of what blockchain is, it's a libertarian idea. We're going to get away from central government control, and we're going to transfer that control into something that's controlled by the world, or by people, by groups. And that's what happened. And I believe that, as Richard said, that it's big and it's happening. Maybe a quick question for the audience is that let's self-classify yourself into one of three categories. I know a little bit about it, but I'm pretty much a novice. I'm an intermediate, or I know a lot. Quick show of hands. How many people are kind of a novice? Show of hands. How many are intermediary? And how many are experts? Interesting. See, and you can see here there's 3 or 4 people who really do know a lot about it, but most people don't. Most people don't have that depth of knowledge.
Maybe you better give 101.
Right?
Give your usual 101. This is what you tell friends at dinner who ask that naive question. Explain that.
Yeah, so if you really want to understand blockchain, go talk to Richard. The definition of blockchain is, I think those of you who've done a little bit of work in it know, it's DLT, distributed ledger technology. And so blockchain is the overarching technology that supports many use cases, as Richard said. Cryptocurrencies is just one use case. And over time, it's not going to be the big use case. Now, it's an important use case, but the other use cases are going to be far broader. And Richard touched on it. It's things such as title records, birth records, smart contracts that can execute themselves. Those are all good blockchain applications. And, of course, cryptocurrencies. Now, if you sort them out and go down below the level of what's a blockchain and say, what are the criteria or the characteristics that would make something suitable for blockchain?
Go back one step, because there were so many people that said they're novices. Dude, what is distributed ledger technology? Could you do one sentence on that?
Yeah. So we're all these days familiar with database technology, with things like Oracle's original Oracle 8, Oracle 11, with the formation of technologies that can bring data in, store it, and release it to you when you need it. What's wrong with that? Well, number one, hackable, not necessarily easy to control, a number of questions about that technology. And so blockchain attempts to do more than that. So what does blockchain do and what is DLT? So DLT is nothing more than a ledger that has information in it. And that information could be the identification of a cryptocurrency, who owns it and how it's been transacted. It could be a smart contract. Dell computers converting there into it. Could be many different things. It's just a ledger, very simple. What are the characteristics of that ledger that blockchain does that will be better than buying an Oracle database? So number one, it's immutable. Can't ever be changed. You can fix it so that it is permanent. Second, it's something that can have fairly fast speed of execution and transaction speeds, although cryptocurrencies are quite slow. We'll get to that later. I'm sure you'll get to that in the conference later. But the speed of execution, the ease of execution. Third is it can be permissioned or permissionless, so the control structure is better than what you could do with a typical ledger transaction. But the most important thing, it's set up in a way where you have multiple people inputting to it. It's got multiple inputs. If you have a single input, not all that clear that you really need to have blockchain technology. I'd argue that you probably don't. It's probably better off with an Oracle or some other, Sybase, another ledger technology. So it's multiple user, immutable, easy to track, permanent, and easy to get into, access from the outside, permissionless. If you have those characteristics, you need blockchain.
All right, and you were talking about what just let me push you one further. So would we need title, one second, Richard, would we need title insurance, for example?
No.
So if you had a blockchain ledger record of this is the coordinates of the property, you wouldn't have to pay when you close on a house, you wouldn't have to pay title insurance.
When you buy a house, why do you need title insurance? Because you don't know who owned it before you did. And those title records are not in the government, they're in the hands of a private company. Chicago Title, Stewart Title, they own the title plant, as it's called. And so if that was in an immutable record system, could never be changed, you could go back and you could see the full chain of title, why would you need title insurance? You would, there's only one record.
That's my favorite explanation, which real people get. Richard.
Yeah, I think a point that really is very complementary to what Dennis says is there's all these new applications. There are some things that the blockchain could do that could be done with current technology. For example, there's no reason that you should have T+3 settlement. It's absurd.
What that means is you buy stocks and your money's due on the third day, and that's
third day you trade.
Or you deposit a check in the bank and they say it'll clear. You get $200 today, $4,800 it won't come till tomorrow or the next day.
And what great minds and students like you do, you're disruptors. So even though the existing technology could manage same-day settlement, not T+3, somebody out there is going to do instantaneous settlement or same-day settlement using the blockchain. It could have been done, but innovation is often strapped by legacies, and people, we've got first movers, then you've got fast followers, then you've got slow followers, and then you've got I'd rather die than change. and so the inventors who are using the technology may in fact disrupt by doing what could have been done by people who operate legacy systems. And so we've got two forks, Dennis's fork, and then what can change that legacy systems prevent changing, even though they make common sense and are technologically capable of occurring.
So let me ask you something I was going to ask later, but what do you each think of, what do you think the top 3 operational changes will be in the next short term, like 4 or 5 years? What 3 places would you take turns? Each do one first. Dennis, what's your first one where we'll see it?
Before I say that, I'd like to piggyback on just one thing that Richard said that I think is real important. If you really want to understand what Richard talked about with T+3 and check processing and so forth, all you have to do is read Stephen Levitt, Freakonomics. How many people have read Freakonomics? A lot of you haven't. If you haven't, got to read it. The fundamental premise in Freakonomics is very simple. Levitt says, everything makes sense for an economic reason. And when you look at T+3 or why do checks take so long, it's an economic reason. Somebody gets the float. So if you get the float in T+3, why would you want to give that up? It's not hard to figure out. So that same thing causes it to be very difficult to change. You could change T+3 today. It would be trivial to change. But there are other forces that prevent it. So which are going to be the applications that will change first? And that's kind of a lead into why. Well, you've got to overcome those economic forces. So T+3 is not going to be real easy to change because there's some vested interests who don't want it to change. Check 21, the check clearing process, which immediate check clearing, very slow to be adopted. Somebody's getting a float. So where is
Excuse me, sidebar. If those of you who are not bankers understand the flow, if I put my money in the checking today and the bank doesn't give me access to it for 3 days, they're earning interest. Okay, it's a teeny bit of interest. It was my $5,000 deposit, but everybody's banks earn interest on that 3 days when it's not mine and it's not the person whose money the account came out of. The banks own that money for 3 days, and it's a lot of money. It's a little interest, but it adds up to a lot of money. Sorry, I just wanted to translate.
You maybe to add one thing to that that's important. My career has been in the insurance industry. When I started in the insurance business back in the late 60s, early 70s, and particularly in the 80s and 90s, interest rates were very high. So as an insurance company, we could do what was called cash flow underwriting. We could write a work comp policy, lose 10 or 20% on the policy, or pay out 10 or 20% more than our premium, and still make a ton of money because we held it for a long period of time. Today, because the duration of the liability hasn't changed, still 3 years for work comp, for example, so you have 3 years to float, but you earn nothing on it. So now you have to make a lot more money on it. So that's another example of change.
All right, so where is it that well, I'm trying to triage between people who I see sitting there going, oh, now I get it, and people who are going, yeah, but where's it going?
Okay.
So give me one, and then I'm going to go to you, Richard. Where, for people in this room, and you got a whole day full of cases of where it's going to be used. Give me one example where you expect, despite the inertia of vested interests who like doing it the way they're doing it now, give me one breakthrough that you think will happen soon, within 5 years or over the next 5 years.
The one that's going to happen over the next year is not necessarily the one that's the best, but because there's so little resistance to it and so much advantage that it will occur, and that's contract processing. Dell Computers contracts next year are going to be smart contracts, executable. There's no economic force that doesn't want that to happen.
Wait, what does that mean?
Okay, a contract that is executable in blockchain contract. If you buy today a product, you go buy a Dell computer, you buy whatever, you buy a car, anything you buy, when you get that contract, you may get a piece of electronic paper. They say to you, by the way, fill out this card and register it, tell me what you got, which is just a marketing device on their behalf anyway. And so there's no real permanent record of it. If you instead recorded at the point of inception who owned it, and you put that into a smart contract that was executable, and it was out on a blockchain, it could be viewed by whoever needed to see it. Serviceman, the company itself. You could do this in many different ways, or in any kind of commercial contract.
Or for a recall, or for
anything. And so you now have a permanent, immutable record of that. And if you start from day one, it's easy to do. Why is it difficult to do that with title records? You have 300 years of property ownership. And you got to go back to when Elizabeth Warren, who was one of the Native Americans, owned her property, so you try to bring it forward. So you can't get the history. That's the challenge. But in contracts, you can do it today.
Okay.
So
not just purchases, but service contracts, for example.
Everything.
Kind of
So
contract.
people are going to see that. Now, there are several groups that have been formed around. Accenture's a big leader, IBM's a big leader, BCG is in there doing consulting work on it. And they're forming groups that are industry-specific applications that are going to create software that will allow you to do all your transaction processing in that form. And it's better if it's a multiple input system. There's not a lot of resistance to that, so that's going to happen.
All right,
now,
Richard.
Just to throw one on the other side for just 2 sentences, and then we'll turn to Richard, which is payments. Payments is the obvious one, but there's a lot of resistance.
Richard,
Yeah,
where will it go?
I think Dennis gave us a verb overview, and I think if there's a couple of things to think about which follow, and I'll dovetail to your Native American thing.
Oh my goodness, this is my two favorite calls. But then they're not. They're features.
There is a problem with historical records. There's a problem that we're a frontier nation. So title insurance in Germany is less of a business than it is here, where nobody, had legal records when the Pilgrims landed. But there's an analogy, and it goes so far as I'm advising a company that's working with young artists, and we have a great deal of fraud in art. So you take a young artist, you take an Israeli company that makes an embedded instrument that if you mess around with it, you put the record on the blockchain, and all of a sudden you have the ability for artists to control their destiny and their life and have it in a blockchain. And as a matter of fact, Christie started just working on this. The second thing to think, and don't underestimate China in this role. The People's Bank of China set aside Shenzhen, okay, and like they did as a special economic zone, the PBOC, the central bank, off Dennis's point, they just recorded on a blockchain first application of $300,000 ag loan with all of the documentation. So remember, in that society, they have less legacy systems. They have what economists call less rent seekers. That is, people who benefit by creating monopoly profits from law, not from business acumen. And just beware that there's a very serious effort by the central bank that has already done what Dennis is saying, payment systems, and let alone health. And I'll give you one. You know, what we go to in the fact that why do we spend, twice as much as the rest of the world per capita on health care? $3 trillion, ridiculous numbers, and no better efficacy in health, life expectancies, etc. You go today, you get an x-ray at one hospital, an MRI at another, you send a specialist, they're all decentralized. There's monopoly profits in medicine, and the tech folks are going to disrupt it because there's too much interplay. So I think that that's very important. And then a random suggestion. I teach at the University of Chicago, as Dennis does. We're colleagues and friends and mutual admirers and worked on things all of the time. And we have to understand that education, what are the potential areas there? And then let me hit one thing which is a food for thought. We've got companies that collect data in social media that you own, okay? And the question is, who owns Terry's shopping pattern? Who owns what I Google? Who owns what Dennis is researching and his lectures that go over the thing? And so there are startups now that are competing with Facebook that are saying, okay, no. Is a private blockchain beginning now says, I own my data, and for $10 a month, you can get my driving patterns. You can get the TV programs. Now, I'm not going to go on social media and give it away. I want to have it for $10 a month. You can buy it. So just think of the major disruptions that could come, to the Googles. Now, either they're going to do what happens often in technological change. And I mean, if we take a look at a record, IBM starts the whole thing, and then IBM misses something, and a guy by the name of Bill Gates catches on, and then another one by Steve Jobs, and then all of these guys then miss YouTube, and then they miss the next one, and they're all rolled up. So the Schumpeterian thing is, don't underestimate the individual inventors, and don't underestimate the fact that if we study economic history, DuPont's 27 major inventions, something like 26 were bought. rayon, nylon. So there's going to be opportunities for entrepreneurs, and it's good because they're the stars who can do it at least cost R&D as an economist, but they're not the best commercializers of it, innovators. So look at everything from Facebook and the models, personal property rights, to does somebody else get to become a trillionaire on my dispensing my information freely?
That's what it's all about. Now, I want to take you to one place we haven't gone, surprisingly, and I'm particularly interested, and that's the world of the markets. Futures, stocks, cash transactions. We're in Chicago, we're the futures markets. You made this happen, and I just see that yesterday or 2 days ago, Fidelity rolled out a platform for, we haven't gotten cryptos yet, but I want to talk about the impact of this kind of change on the financial markets, either stocks, futures. How about just my MasterCard? Do I need a MasterCard? I mean, do I have a chip in my finger maybe and it's instantaneous? It's like science fiction.
Yeah, in any technological development, there's always this seminal event that's really important. And I believe that over the last 3 or 4 years, maybe the single most seminal event on the financial market side, not necessarily medical and food safety and so forth, is Fidelity. Because Fidelity's announcement just 2 days ago legitimizes custody. The problem with the financial markets and the structure of the way they operate is that if you go to buy a cryptocurrency, you take huge custody risk because of the counterparty problem. And Fidelity's move, it's the first really major institution that's substituting custody and counterparty protection for the problems that's out there in cryptocurrency.
Wait, let me stop you. Do you want to do crypto?
I want to buttress what my good friend Dennis is saying. Right now, Bank of America has 50 patents pending. Citigroup has just created the equivalent for cryptos. Their version is an ADR. So you can actually go out to a major bank. It's already happening. It was announced. You've got to get to the markets. You've got stuff like our tiny exchange using the blockchain. I think most of it, Terry, will come pre-trade and post-trade. The matching engine will be there, but settlement payments, everything before will be an ICE.
Let me stop you here. Let me go back a step. I jumped over something, although it's not necessarily crypto, but you brought it up. Let me jump before we get to the financial services industry. Let's talk about cryptocurrencies. Dennis, cryptocurrencies 101 in 2 sentences.
Okay. We've all heard of Bitcoin. There are 2,000 listed cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is one. The market cap of all cryptocurrencies today is a little over $200 billion. Bitcoin is half of that, $100 billion. Those 2,000 cryptocurrencies can be traded on 14,000 exchanges. Now, that's a quick summary. My suggestion to you is go to a website that's called CoinMarketCap. Very simple. It gives you all the data on the 2,000 cryptocurrencies and the 14,000 exchanges. I'll give you a couple of predictions and a couple of places to look at. My prediction would be that at least a quarter and probably a half of those 2,000 cryptocurrencies are a fraud and are going to collapse. But there are a bunch
So you trade your dollars. All these kids that are now trading. I bought Bitcoin at 482, which is when you told me to buy it, by the way. And I watched it go up to 20,000, and now it's 6,500 or something like that. Okay, so you go to a place. Well, I don't think there's a storefront where you go to with your check or your money, your bag of cash, and switch it into Bitcoin. So the places where you might go, not only to buy Bitcoin, which is more reputable, but a lot of these other currencies,
there are 14,000 of them unregulated. If you want to buy a stock, IBM or General Motors, you go to JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, you go to whoever you're going to buy it from. They have their brokerage operation fully regulated. in the U.S., we're regulated by two regulators, unlike most of the rest of the world. We have the SEC that regulates the cash markets, stocks and bonds. We have the CFTC that regulates the futures markets. The first one is rules-based, the second one is principles-based. Very different regulation, but it's regulated. If you want to buy in the cash markets or if you want to buy in the futures markets, you're buying from a regulated FCM, broker, dealer. If you want to buy Bitcoin, you're buying from your hardware store.
Okay, there we go. And then some Mt. Gox and this disappears. I'm sorry, the computer went down and someone stole it. Wait, I put my dollars in there. What about my Bitcoin profits? Okay. So that was 101. I'm sorry, I have to go back. Because every once I'm looking at some people and I'm seeing eyes going, wait, what was that? Now let's move forward to...
Terry, just to put an exclamation point, but if you buy it from Fidelity...
That's...
Now, no counterparty.
Or Citibank.
Or Citibank, yeah. Not just Fidelity, but the Fidelity announcement today, I think, is because in addition to what Richard said, MasterCard has a patent on payments technology that they put out. So in theory, anybody who wants to go and do payments processing has got to go through MasterCard to get the patent right. Now, whether that'll hold or not, is another story. But the one that was really kind of a seminal event to me that I think is going to really get people's attention is Fidelity. Why? Because they're so big, they have so much under management. They're setting up a trading platform, and they've got a chief executive who really believes in this stuff, unlike Jamie Dimon, who in November said it was a fraud. And then 3 months later, he comes back and says, maybe I was right. So,
we're working on it in the back.
So you've got a chief executive driving a company that's huge, that happens to also own a lot of the company, and that chief executive believes in it, and they've got a lot of money at stake.
What did Fidelity... I printed this out right away. I emailed the link to everybody when I saw that Fidelity rolls out crypto trading and custody platform.
If you haven't seen it, read it.
It's in the hot news today if you just look at it. But tell me in English one sentence, what did Fidelity just do?
Fidelity announced that they're going to be able to set up a trading and a custody platform for your cryptocurrency.
Now I can take my account at Fidelity.
Just like the CME and just like the New York Stock Exchange. Now, the CME has its clearing as part of the central organization. The New York Stock Exchange has two organizations. You have clearing and you have trading. Over at the CME in the futures markets, it's one. Over 150 years, here's my being a board member, I have to advertise. Over 150 years, there has never been a single penny lost because of a custody problem, a counterparty risk problem on the futures exchanges. Not one penny lost. In the cryptocurrencies, every time you turn around, there's something disappearing and there's theft occurring. Why is that? Because of a custody system that's predicated on principles-based regulation from the CFTC and an SRO, self-regulatory organizations that set all the margin requirements, the accessibility, all of that, and you go to your FCM and they put extra on there, so I won't go into detail. But the point is, you can't lose or you should never say that. But yeah, right. But on highly unlikely to lose. Now, Fidelity said, we're going to let you trade cryptos. We're not going to let you trade 2,000 because of a significant number of fraud. They'll come to the cryptos that are good and valid, and go to that, and you'll go to that this afternoon in more detail. The ones that are valid will be tradable, and you can custody it. So the private key and public key, which is the way cryptos work, will be secure. Big difference.
Richard.
Yeah, 2 points. The whole custody issue is really critically important, and there's a psychology out there, particularly among a lot of young entrepreneurs, that regulation is your enemy, and they like disrupting, and they're missing something. Okay, in my particular case, helping create the CFTC created $100 billion of market cap in what was an industry not, and I worked on that legislation, and there was a lot of people in our business who said, why are you pro the CFTC? The calls I get from entrepreneurs is always, we don't have to go through government, we don't want to do anything, they had no value whatsoever. So those among you, think about $100 billion of market cap virtually 90% of everything traded was only traded because of redefinition from the Department of Agriculture to an independent regulatory. Second point I want to make is, so regulation can enhance business and isn't the enemy of business. Second, I want to make, I think, a point that is very relevant and put it in context. When I had the privilege of adopting Chicago as my hometown 45 years ago, I did a lot of work on redesigning ag contracts. And so I studied the Bungies, the Cargills, the continental grains of the world. And let's take any of them, Bungie, Cargill. They buy grain in western Kansas. They sell it to a terminal. The farmer trucks it to a local terminal. The local terminal then ships it to what's called a terminal elevator. So you have a local grain elevator, terminator. Then the terminal elevator operator loads the grain, puts it on a barge. Barge goes down to Mississippi. They unload the grain, put it in an export tower, forward the book rates, load it on an international shipper. It moves across the ocean. It lands at Rotterdam, and it then gets railed to a German miller. The margins for handling the world distribution of food is 2%. The same margin for moving money, which has no physical handling, no movement of physical commodities. So it has to be a revolution in the payment system, because there's something funny about moving a virtual thing, money, with no cost as moving the world's food supply. Now, if you look at it through that lens, whether it's MasterCard making 2% or American Express or whatnot, there's going to be two things that happen. It doesn't matter what the innovation is. You're going to get the first movers, and you're going to get first followers, and you're going to get slow movers. And some of these big organizations, you're going to turn around if they're slick, and all of a sudden you'll think nothing is happening, and then they, like Fidelity, roll out a product, or like Jamie Dimon will all of a sudden become the leader. Or many of you, if we follow technological change, will invent something and sell it to the bank for $400 million because that's the way America works. A wonderful country, and you get paid to take the risk and create the ideas and then monetize it to a large organization. So we should be very optimistic about where this is going. All of you in this room maybe do Amazon and $1 trillion company, or maybe you'll be able to do Amazon and $1 trillion company, or maybe you'll be one of the people who sells it to Amazon for $500 million. It doesn't much matter, but it's very important to recognize that most invention occurs outside of small big companies. Most innovation, the commercialization, occurs within big organizations. So very important to focus on inventive activity as opposed to innovative activity.
Wow, there's some advice. So a lot of these people work for these big corporations. How do you become a standout? Are they ready to acknowledge there's someone in their ranks
They did
that gets it?
with GitHub. Everybody know what GitHub is, right? Smart audience, 26 million. Or we'll pay him $400,000 to program in Google's new Chicago headquarters, and we'll bring him to Chicago. We'll bring her to either raise her money or bring him to a big company.
This is so exciting. You must have questions now. I hope you're all as inspired and uplifted. I think what we see here is it's a technology, but it's not just a technology. It's going to change the way we live, and that will happen because of these creators of technology.
Yeah.
That's very good.
And
will you get your questions ready, and will you grab the microphone, Paul, and raise your hand if you've got a question, and we'll try and get as many. I want you to know, I promise these gentlemen, they're both catching planes. So in 7 minutes, this will be over, and I'm walking them out the door. So now we're on that fast round. Okay,
1 minute on Richards. The impact on you is going to be on your health as well. Richard commented about there's 3 primary systems out there: Epic, Allscripts, and these big healthcare systems that are out there. And Cerner, those 3 systems control all of the EMRs, electronic medical records. Those systems are different, the technologies don't interface. Eventually, they should be a blockchain system, so all of your medical records are set. Now, the other thing that's really important is food safety. Food systems are going to be converted to blockchain, so every head of lettuce, when it's
Walmart
initiated...
said they're doing that. What is
Exactly
that?
right. RFID chips, trackers, they track...
Wait, it's lettuce. They pick it out of the ground. It's wet and floppy.
Right.
How do they track that head of lettuce or
what
that?
you're going to do is it's going to be tracked. There are electronic trackers. You're going to know where it came from. You're going to know chain of custody, and it's going to all be in the blockchain.
It's going to be linked in. Dennis is 100% right, because also of the concomitant development of remote sensing. So you're going to be able to tag it on a railroad. You're going to be able to combine remote sensing and the blockchain to follow anything.
Oh my God! Remember when Zebra Technologies was the greatest startup company in Chicago? Back there with a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, Stephen Ross from Hyde Park Angels. Great panel, really appreciate it. I have a question for you, Rich. You were talking about art and how we could potentially put that on a blockchain. I think that the question I have is, why would we use a blockchain in this case when a centralized database would probably work just as well and faster, and the blockchain's main selling point would be the security aspects of the decentralization. So I want to get your thoughts on why you think blockchain's a good application for that.
Well, you've got the way art works is you have a couple of kind of distribution networks, and it's mostly an opaque market. It's not a regulated market, as Dennis has referred to. So if you take a young artist, the creator of the good, the farmer, okay, wants a record. If you go to a major gallery, if I want to buy a piece of art, I go to 2 or 3 dealers who know where it is. Okay.
And validate its authenticity.
And validate its authenticity.
Yeah, blockchain, no issue.
No issue. I don't have to worry about a fraud. And there's been, $100 million frauds and zillion-dollar frauds.
Yeah,
Right there.
Wait, can I just add a suggestion in terms of intellectual property? There's a coin called Steem, S-T-E-E-M. Go to a website called Steemit, S-T-E-E-M-I-T. Somebody writes a blog, you get Facebook up, down, that kind of thing. Every time you get it up, you get a penny. Or not a penny, but you get a small amount of money. Look at the Steemit blogs and you'll see this person made 200, this person made 500. It shows it right there. Go to steemit.com. You'll be fascinated.
I do that. All right, back there. And then there's one call up in front here.
Jeff Carter.
Oh, is it on?
Jeff Carter from Westwood Ventures.
Hey, Jeff.
Custody, do you think it eventually becomes a commodity in the
The blockchain allows you to do custody better than any other way for the variety of reasons. Multiple inputs, immutability, permanent record, and all of that. But what will happen is they're going to emerge multiple systems, just like we have with electronic medical records, unfortunately. It would be better if there was a single standard for custody that was created by an exchange infrastructure, but that's not going to happen.
What's going on in the custody world is interesting, because if you made recall at the outset.
Wait, 12 people said, what do you mean by custody? Say that again?
Where is my security? Where am I holding my shares?
I buy Bitcoin, who holds it?
Who owns it, and who's the custodian? I think it was in your introduction, with great surprise to many of you, but for those of us who were students, it's no accident that Northern Trust is at the forefront of this. They understand they're one of the great custodial. Their name is Trust. It's Northern Trust, and the name of similar institutions are trust banks. And these banks, it's not surprising, because if I'm State Street or Northern Trust, I gotta have a skunk work with 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 people working on transformation of custodial services, you know.
Otherwise, they'll be serious. They had a catalog that everybody had.
That's right. That's right. And then ultimately we'll have it. What happens is, right now, Terry's Long Apple, I would like to buy it. There's about so many intermediaries in this transfer and payment and custody. It's remarkable. If I knew Terry really owned it, and I had a smart contract with a bank that had it, seriously, I'd consummate it, basically would end up taking ownership through a custodial system.
Wait a minute. What about the exchanges?
Well,
they set price.
They have to.
They have replaced by blockchain.
They have to think
They
about
may be their own disruptor.
Here's another question.
Dmitry Jokin, Chainworks. You mentioned that technology was born in libertarian circles, and my question is, now that the blockchain is hopefully going to replace everything, right, and everything is going to be converted to immutable records, right? Do you envision that the government are going to actually strengthen the grip on the society because everything is recorded?
Yeah. It's actually, first of all,
everything. Will the government gain greater control once everything is
everything go to immutable records? Everything won't go to immutable records because there's some things that don't need it. So there'll be some places where it works, some where it doesn't. Is the government going to intervene? You bet. China already has. And if you start looking at the way that's going to work, if you haven't looked at it, who knows what WeChat is? Quite a few of you do. WeChat is the world's biggest social network. Guess what? China has, through their access to it, full access to the government of all of your WeChat records, what you do, where you are, all of those things. The U.S., we abhor that. So it's going to be very different group to group. But the interesting thing about that is how it got structured, because it is immutable. But the other thing is, you see these criticisms of anonymity and you have too much power consumption and all that. That's all nonsense. Because the high power consumption, yes, that's true in Bitcoin, but it's a decision of a rules body. It can be completely eliminated by other forms of blockchain infrastructure.
I want to pick up something that Dennis said. So you got all of these things going on, and people mining and consuming electricity and power.
I was going to ask that, yeah.
And just happens. There's all kinds of things about safety, transmission, grids, custody, all stuff like that. But this is interesting, again, to think in a second order effect. Let's take Iceland, and everybody says this is terrible about how much electricity is going to Bitcoin mining. Iceland is power long, okay, because of hydro. Geothermal. And geothermal energy, how do you export it? So the model used to be that you exported by taking a heavy value-added component commodity and produced it where it shouldn't be produced, like aluminum. So you get to synthetically export your power through all of the energy that you need to make aluminum. Now what happens is, you don't drag aluminum from where it ain't. You get to export the electricity from mining and developing a technology associated. So all of a sudden this country, which is rich in power, instead of moving around bulk commodities and actually causing pollution where it shouldn't be and things like that, you're now having a model, and it's like the grain business, where build elevators where the grain is, instead of moving the power companies to the users or near a river, what in fact is the miners are moving to North Carolina where the power is cheap. And so we're having a very subtle but profound effect on the distribution and transmission of electricity. So I'm just making a point. Remember that these things have profound second and third order effects, and there's as much money to be made on figuring out the second and third order effects as there is to it. The guy in Paul McGuire out of the Board of Trade made a lot of money. They heard about the Russians, so the Russians bought beans. So first people bought beans. Okay, and then the second smart people bought, other oil seeds because they figured that the price of the ones, and the third people basically got short gold because the only way the Russians could finance the purchase of the soybeans was through gold. So first, second, third, fourth order effects are very important, and try to think about it as your entrepreneurs, as not only the first order effect, but what is the second round, third round, because there may be as much or more money to be made on figuring a third order effect. What's the power bet? Do I get longer, shorter utility? And maybe it's related to the blockchain.
Oh my goodness. Well, remember I started by saying I felt like I was sitting with Ben Franklin and Leonardo da Vinci. Now you get what I mean. In a world in which there's so much mess out there that I don't even turn on the news anymore, it is so exciting to see what the opportunity exists for economic growth that's going to help all of us in multiple orders of change. We thank our panelists, Richard Sandor, Dennis Chookaszian. I'm literally promising them I'll walk them right off the stage and out the door. They have cars waiting to go to the airport. A round of applause.
So how about it again?
One more time for us. Thank you very much. Great information.